In this video, we're going to look at one of the most common algebra mistakes, one that essay students make almost every day, and it concerns algebraic fractions, which are in a form something like this. So if you've got a fraction with a variable, like an x, in both the numerator and the denominator, then it's very tempting, especially for students who are new to algebraic fractions, to say, well, hey, there's an x in the top and the bottom of the fraction, surely then they just sort of cancel each other out. Now that is not correct, but following that logic, that would then say that if they cancel, we're left with a 4, so the answer will equal 4. And a lot of students will write that answer, especially if they're new to this, and even if they're not new. So I see experienced students still doing the same thing, but this is wrong for several reasons. First of all, a clue would be that the answer here, 4, is suggesting that this always comes out to be 4, which looks a little strange given that these have got variables. So that doesn't intuitively seem correct. If we then actually take a value for x and substitute it into the fraction, so if we let x be 2, for example, it should be, according to our logic here, that the answer is going to be 4, always going to be 4. So if we put a 2 in here in the numerator, we get 2 plus 4 divided by a 2 in the denominator. So 2 plus 4 is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So these are not consistent, so something has gone wrong there. And the thing that went wrong was our initial approach, was the way that we just cancel these terms. So you've got to be really, really careful with just assuming you can cancel in an algebraic fraction. Let's look at what we should have done. Well, x plus 4 divided by x, what does that really mean? It means that the x on the denominator, which remember just means divide, a fraction is another way to write divide, that x is dividing both the x and the 4. But in our cancelling, we're sort of just thinking of the x as dividing the x and forgetting that this x is also dividing the 4 on the numerator. So if we think about this correctly, this is really saying x divided by x, which we can literally write down, plus 4 divided by x. Now x divided by x, or any number divided by itself, is just 1. So that would simplify, let me put it here, to just 1 plus 4 over x. Now if we take a numerical value like 2 and substitute it in and see what happens. So we know that the correct answer when we substitute in 2 should be this number here, 3. Let's see if we get that answer when we process it this way. So that would be 1 plus 4 divided by 2, which is 1 plus 2, which is 3. So that does give us a correct answer using the correct method. So just remember that any fraction, whether it's numerical or algebraic, is just another way of writing divide. And remember that whatever is on the denominator is dividing everything that is in the numerator. However, I can understand why it's confusing for students, because there are scenarios where you can just cancel. For example, this slight modification from this example is such that we are just allowed to cancel off the two x terms. Now, why is that? And why is it different? It's different because here we've only got one term on the numerator. Now, it might look like you've got two terms or even several terms, but this x is multiplying to the bracket. As soon as it becomes a multiplication of the bracket, then that effectively makes it into one term. This is just like sort of one term. They're gathered together in this particular form. Because there's only one term, if you divide the top and the bottom of this fraction by x, remembering that x can be any number, then that one would cancel and that one would cancel, so you have cancelled the x's from every term. Whereas over here, just cancelling those x's was forgetting about the 4. But by cancelling that x on the top, you're already cancelling it because it's part of the bracket, so you don't need to worry about those terms that are within the bracket. So you can see the difference between that and that is fairly subtle, and for a new student or even a reasonably experienced student, it's not easy to distinguish between the two. So I would never criticize a student for making this mistake initially, because it's really, really common and it is a little confusing, but you've just got to learn from the mistake and basically just be really cautious when you go instinctively to cancel in an algebraic fraction. If you look at this scenario here, again, it's the same fraction just flipped. A lot of students will just say, hey, there's an x in the top, an x in the bottom, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel, just like this, and then they'll say, okay, that's going to leave me maybe just 4, or a more common response here would be that, hey, I can kind of see that the 4 is in the bottom part of the fraction, so maybe the answer is 1 over 4. But again, that's not correct. The answer is not 1 over 4, and you could prove that just by substituting in some value for x and seeing that the answer isn't going to come out to be 1 over 4. So in fact, in this scenario, there's really nothing you can do. You can't even distribute in the same way we did here. We made this one fraction into 2. You can't even do that. Again, just be aware that this x in the top is being divided by all of x plus 4, not just the x. And because it's not just being divided by the x, that's why you cannot cancel. So the takeaway from this video is to be super careful when you instinctively just want to cancel in an algebraic fraction. Just think about whether the scenario does actually allow you to do that, or if you've got to be more cautious. But really, you just need to gain enough experience to know in which scenarios you can cancel and in which scenarios you cannot.